my name is Anthony Frasca, and today I'm going to talk about the population dynamics in India. So the first one that we have today is what has been the history of fertility and population growth since independence. So, to start, India began their independence in 1947. Compared to other countries, India has had marginally way higher fertility rates just naturally. In the 50s, each mother averaged about 6 kids per family, which is very high compared to any other country. This was right before the government actually became huge advocates for family planning, which I will get to later, but briefly it was a way for the government to expand population growth very rapidly. When we moved to the 70s, India went through nationwide sterilization, which is a way to eliminate mass pregnancy, just ways to lower the reproductive rates in India. And this was actually hated by the government because this was literally the movement of the opposite of what the government wanted to do. In the 80s, this was primarily focused on the contraceptives and sex education. Contraceptives meaning birth control and other things to lower and reduce pregnancy. And just a fun fact, in 2020, the total fertilization rates have dropped by 2.1%, which isn't a big deal, but it's just something to keep in mind as India has suffered through these historic movements. The second thing that we have is the government programs and cultural practices that have had an effect on the population. The first one, like I previously mentioned, was family planning, and this was a way to expand the population of India and increase just the amount of kids per family. The main goal was to generate more males than females, as males were just considered the more leader of the family. In 2005, India launched the National Rural Health Mission, which was dedicated to the people who lived in more rural areas who suffered from the family planning and just became bad victims from it. These people would give money out, food, just accessible health care and stuff to provide for these families in need who went through this horrible thing. Next we have is the Janani Suraksha Yojana, the JSY, and this acts as an incentive to reduce the infant mortality rates, meaning abortion, suicide while you're conceiving or while you're pregnant, just self-harm to the mother while she was pregnant. This plan ultimately helped because it just provided more closure and a lot more resources to the mothers who were in need when they were enduring this horrible time. The last two ideas that the government and the people imposed on each other, well, first was the use of contraceptives, like I mentioned earlier, to reduce these fertility rates, like birth control, condoms, sex education, just stuff like that. And the government, on the other hand, they raised the age of marriage when you can get married, because most religions, you can conceive once you're married, not before. And this was just big for the Hinduism religion, as they don't really have a certain age limit on when you can get married. It's more prearranged in a way. And next, I created a graph on Excel. This is more so about the births per women, the fertility rates, how it's decreased over the couple of years. As you can see, in 1960, it was pretty much about 6 kids per woman. In the 70s, it moved down a little bit to 5.7, 5.8 right there. In the 80s, dropped down about 1% to 4.8. In the 90s, this was big. It dropped straight to 4. 2000 was about 3.5. 2010, 2.7. And 2020 at about 2. So now I looked at the number. It's about 1.98. So it's still about the same as it was in 2020, about 2 kids per mother. And it's not I would say it's about what the United States is, about 2 or 3. And the other thing I wanted to get into is the sex ratio imbalance in India. Like I previously mentioned earlier, most families see the sons as the leader of the family and the inheritors of the property, and just deal more so with the financial aspects of the family. There's more males than females in India, mainly because of what I mentioned earlier with just the controlment of birth and the family planning. This was really, it just wiped out the population completely and made it very lopsided with how many males there are against females. There's widespread female fetus abortion because with the very accessible healthcare, there became accessible ultrasounds, and if families found out they're getting a daughter, they'd immediately get an abortion, which was just a cultural norm at the time. A lot of people think it's horrible, which I think it is, but that was their way of maintaining a strong kingdom and just making sure that their country was under control. But it's just tragic. And the next thing is even worse. I put a trigger warning: the female infanticide, which doesn't occur anymore, but is a huge factor that skewed the sex ratio to males, because if any girl was born, they'd immediately slaughter it, which was absolutely horrible. And the last thing that affects the sex ratio imbalance is that rural areas have more healthcare resources than urban areas. When you're in a rural place, you have more hospitals, stores, just nutrients that you can acquire more easily compared to when you're in the urban areas. You got to grow, you got to travel, transportate to get all your goods. And the last thing that I want to talk about are just things to consider when thinking about India in the future. It's growing in a momentum effect. The population will not stop growing. It's soon to surpass China. It's at about 1.6 billion people right now, so definitely keep an eye on that. India definitely has an aging population, which causes just such a big lopsided in numbers, because India has so many young kids at the same time, and in about 20 years from now, all these 60-year-olds will be 80-year-olds, and with rapid urbanization, there's going to be more jobs opening up, more healthcare, which will lead to more teaching in the younger generation, and it's just a big kind of spirals down, because it's just so much, there's just a very high standard on the younger generation. And lastly, they're going to enforce gender discrimination laws, which will eliminate any more of the family planning and just controlment of the gender at birth. So thank you all for listening. I hope you have a good night.